If you know these three numbers, no matter what level of marketing, business owner, no matter where you at, if you know these three numbers, you will use your business differently.
Over the course of a business and over the course of an entire thing, what you're really focused on is what does the vast majority of your customers do and what are they worth and how did you acquire them?
If you can do math, you know which one makes you more money.
Once I get a model in place that I have a rough idea of how we're going to monetize, really at the end of 30 days, I can tell you what that customer is going to be worth at 90, 180, and 360.
Welcome to Marketing from the Edge podcast. I'm Cody Alexander. I've directly generated over $200 million in net revenue over the last 5 years through innovative marketing and a numbers-first strategy. Joined with me is my dad. John Alexander has become the go-to expert in the direct marketing field, generating over $1.5 billion in revenue over the last 5 years. Sought by both board of directors and nine-figure businesses, he is an owner/founder of Centurion Publishing and is on the journey of growing this brand new business from 0 to 100 million in annual revenue. Today, we want to give you the three numbers John plans on using to grow his business from 0 to 100 million in annual revenue. These are the three numbers you need to know. Knowing this will scale your business from where you're at today to where you want to be. We'll reveal what the three numbers are, what they mean, how to find them, and why they're the three most important numbers we look at every day. If you're looking to make your first million or are trying to make 100 million, these are the three numbers we'd use to get there. So I'd be interested, now going from leading a marketing division of a company to now being an owner, founder of a company. I know at your time as a marketer, you had a couple numbers you looked at. Now owning a business, how many numbers do you look at to decide whether you're doing well or something needs to change?
So this is, I think, the 8th business that I've actually owned. And so they're all slightly different, right? One thing that I figured out, any business you can boil down to 3 key metrics. Is there a lot of other shit to look at? Absolutely, right? And so at one point in the recent company, which is probably the most I've ever had as far as numbers to look at one point I had 30 reports I got every single morning.
Damn.
And so some of them were highlighted reports. Some of them were low light style reports, right? Some were yesterday's reports. Some were trending reports, but you just had a lot more to look at, right? A lot more data, a lot more to look at. On average, I would say probably on the low end, there were 7 to 8 reports I'd looked at every single day. But as far as health, I usually focus on 3 key metrics. And I found this in all the businesses I've dealt with, especially on the online world. This is basically the way it works, right? You want to know how many customers did you get yesterday? What did it cost to get them? And how much are they worth long-term? Long-term is a relative figure.
Right.
In the financial publishing space, like I look at 90, 180, and 360. Those are the time periods I'm looking at. What are they worth in 90 days, 180 days, 360 days?
If you have a monthly recurring model, you're generally going to look at the 1 month 2, all that. So you've got 3 metrics. You're on a path. You're trying to go from 0 to 100 million, right? Do those numbers change at all now that you're kind of in this owner-founder position?
So those are the 3 numbers I'll focus entirely on, right? Once you get a model in place, right? Once you know roughly, whether you're a dry cleaner or whether you're an online publisher, it doesn't really matter. Once you kind of got a model in place on how you're going to generate money off the customer base and what kind of value you're going to provide in exchange for that money, you can start to smooth things out and you have a rough expectation of what things are going to be, what a customer should be worth at 90, 180, and 360 days. And you'll build some metrics around that in order to be able to see it. But primarily, that's what you need. You need customers that you acquire at whatever number works that then ultimately are more valuable 90, 180, and 360 days from today.
What you're looking at is how much did it cost, which is your cost line. How much are you making, which is your revenue line, and how many customers are there, which is kind of like a trend line on are we growing or are we dying?
Yeah, and I think it's pretty easy to understand long-term value, right? 90, 180, 360. It's just a metric. How much money is that customer brought in 90 days? Doesn't matter where it came from. Doesn't matter if you bought 4 of one product or it's what went in the bank account.
And it can be as intelligent or as dumb, for lack of a better word, as you want it to be. And if you're a high-powered data analytic machine, right? Like you can break it down by customer, by action, how valuable that action or that customer is. the company I am, we're not a high powered data analytic company. We're still probably going to do 60 million this year, right? Like you don't have to be a genius to make money, but you have to know your numbers. And, we brute force it by looking at, hey, how much revenue do we generate relative to our acquisition cost, right? Going back, if we brute force it, we're like, okay, for easy math, we generate $100 and it costs us $25 to do it. So our LTV is 4 times greater than our cost to acquire said customer. So for anyone listening, it can be as simple as that, right?
Yeah.
Money comes in, money goes out. And if that number ever shifts, it's got to be intentional. Because if it's not intentional, that's where you got to look at the numbers, right? Like you talk about, that's how you decide what's happening in the business.
Yeah. And if you get all your metrics in place, because there's a lot of lesser metrics like what's your refund rate, right?
Right.
What are your deliverables, right? What's your cost of goods sold? When that's kind of set in place, right, you ultimately figure out one of the lesser metrics is like, what should we spend each month on acquisition? And I've always mostly kept that in the 15 to 25% range.
Yeah.
Because the metrics in the businesses, the way I set them up, refund rates and everything else, typically that generates a significant amount of profit at the end of the month. So you can also kind of judge, and again, I know this is getting in a lesser metric we didn't talk about, right? But you can judge what should you spend to acquire a customer, right? You use LTV and you use channels, but in figuring out how many customers have come in, how much and what they're worth, right? So anyways, that's kind of a much more an aside onto this stuff. Let's get back and focus on this, right? So CPA, the other side of CPA,
which is cost per acquisition,
right? And I use direct cost only, right? So I don't try to figure out, CAC and all the other crap that's out there running around. I went and paid $1,000 for ads on YouTube and I got 5 customers. They all cost me $200. I don't care about refund rates at that stage. I don't care about anything else.
Right.
I'm like, hey, this is how much money I spent. This is how many customers came in the door.
Well, and the reason you don't care about anything down funnel is because you can't control anything at that point. All you can control is I spent $1,000
Yep.
and here's how many people bought. That's just getting down funnel.
Which we'll talk about in a minute because those are metrics that you want to focus on. But
I agree 100%. I've had conversations with people and they're like, well, what about this? Or you're not taking into account the reality of the situation. You're like, probably. But when you're looking at the highest levels of the business, this number will tell you more, in my opinion, than any other number.
yeah, and you can get it quickly, right? You're not looking on all the outliers, right? On the bell curve. You're not looking at all the things on the outside. The misnomer is I'm in the military in technically an intelligence field. The reality is once you get to 70 or 80% confidence level, you make a decision and you move on.
Right.
Because you're never going to get to 100%. And everybody wants to focus on the outliers. Like, well, what about that one guy? Like, who gives a shit about that one guy? Over the course of a business and over the course of an entire thing, what you're really focused on is what does the vast majority of your customers do and what are they worth and how did you acquire them, right? So as you go through your process. So stop worrying about all the, hey, I've got to get it 100%. I mean, hell, I got an accounting degree, right? Like I'm a details guy, but good enough has to be good enough and you move on, right? Here's my rough CPA. That's really all you need. Here's my rough LTV. Like in my case, we talked about 90, 180 and 360. Once I get a model in place that I have a rough idea of how we're going to monetize, really at the end of 30 days, I can tell you what that customer is going to be worth at 90, 180 and 360. Roughly. So I'm like, hey, if he's worth $200 at 30 days, he'll be worth $330 at 90 days. He'll be worth $500 at 180, and he'll be worth $750 at 360. And you can make long-term decisions with 30 days worth of data.
So going in then to lifetime value, whether you do it like hyper intelligently based off of some snazzy attribution model, or you just do it based off brute force, but LTV, lifetime value, is a decision metric, which then you can use CPA, cost per acquisition, relative.
Exactly.
Can you afford to spend more? Or, hey, do we need to start cutting costs? Like, we're not acquiring as profitable customers. And so we need to do one of two things, right? We either need to do a better job monetizing, or we need to cut our costs on acquisition.
And that's the beauty of that. When you look at those three metrics and you look at them as not one more important than the other, they all interact, right? You might be able to get a ton of customers at a great CPA that are worth not much more than what you paid for them 90 days from now. Well, what's the point of that? you're not in business to break even, you're in business to make money.
Right.
You may get just a very few customers at a great CPA that have a high lifetime value. Okay, well, that's great too, but can we get a shit lot more of those customers? Well, not likely. Well, then, okay, well, then I can't use that to grow the business.
Right.
Yes, that's a channel I keep, don't get me wrong, but I don't all of a sudden extrapolate this forward and say, hey, look, awesome, right? So you're always in this dance between front-end acquisitions, which really come down to several numbers, right?
Right.
You're looking at how many numbers come in, how many people did you actually get, what was the cart,
Right.
and what was your conversion rate? All those things help. I look at the high level on front-end acquisition numbers and then not necessarily worry so much about cart and conversion rate. I look a lot less on 1 day and look a lot more on 7 and 30-day trends.
Right.
Because that's really telling you when you're going to make a much longer term decision of the business, you care about a longer time period. Because, I mean, in networks, right? Most of the time in most businesses, networks work really well Friday through Monday and not so well Tuesday through Thursday. People have more time. They're staring at the computer more. On the rest of the week, email works differently. So if you made a decision on Monday, you're like, hey, we're going to do all this week. And then all of a sudden your eyeballs go down. Even if your conversion rate stays the same, you're just going to spend a crap lot more money in order to acquire the same customer. And ultimately you start knee jerking around. We talked a lot about this.
Right. You're getting pulled by numbers instead of you pulling levers to change numbers. I think one thing that's interesting is like you look at the volume of front end orders. So you look at kind of three components together, like the volume, the cart value, and the conversion rate.
I primarily look at the volume, number one. The cart value and the conversion rate are secondary metrics for me, really looking at 7 and 30-day trends. And the reason why is, hey, is the marketplace shifting on me? That's what I care about those for.
Yeah.
If you've got several front-end acquisition products out there to acquire customers and you're anticipating an average cart value, I'll just make one up of $100, and all of a sudden your 7-day trend goes down to $70, you're like, what the hell happened, right? Did something break? Or is the marketplace shifting on us? Or the promo's getting older? Like it tells you a lot of things that then you dive in to look at something else.
I think that's really interesting. So for me, CPA, cost per acquisition, lifetime value, and then my third number is actually conversion rate, right? And then I use order volume and average cart value as like secondary, right? If I could have a fourth number, it'd be average cart value, because that tells you kind of what your exposure is between your cost per acquisition and your lifetime value. Like, hey, how much in the hole am I in on day zero? But for me, conversion rate is for the exact reason you said, is like conversion rate gives me a pulse on performance. It tells me, hey, are the promos we have out there, like, are they the promos that should be out there, right? Hey, are we doing something meaningfully different if that conversion rate moves up or down, right? And I can see like, all right, well, like, then I look at front-end order volume as a secondary metric of, can I scale, or do I need like, hey, conversion rate's up, but front-end order volume is down, which means you probably have the wrong, super great value, but it can't go anywhere. Or, conversion rate is down, but volume's up, which tells you like, maybe we're seeing some fatigue on this promo.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And then, like you have all of those levers, like you said, highly collaborative. For me, conversion rate is like the metric of performance. And then the front end order volume number is something I try to manipulate. As opposed to you look at front end order volume to predict revenue, right? And cost, essentially. You're like, okay, well, if I have 100 orders and they're all worth $100 in 30 days, I've got $10,000 or whatever it is, right? I'm going to go make $10,000. And if it costs you $10 to do it, it's going to cost me $1,000. So I need to go find $1,000 so I can go make 10, right? And I think that at its simplest form is how you grow a business.
Yeah. If I only have one to three different mechanisms for acquiring customers, right? Meaning whether it's promotions or whether it's sources or whatever, right? I only have 3 mechanisms. Yeah, I'm definitely going to look at average cart value and conversion rate a lot tighter, right? When you've got 15 to 25 different acquisition channels or methods, right? In our case, promotions out there that are running to acquire customers, if you've got that many out in the mix, then I only really look at front end order volume because that's the thing that gives me the overall trend. I can't spend, like, the whole point of this thing is I can look at this 5 minutes every morning, right? I get my reports at 5:30 in the morning.
Right.
Between 5:30 and when the day starts, I can look at these and know the health of the business, where we're at and what's happened on a regular basis. If my front end order count stays in a range, I know what my gross revenue is going to be at the end of the month.
Right.
And most businesses are that predictable if you allow them to be. And all businesses have cycles, right?
Yeah.
For our case, July, and for most people, unless you're in the travel and hospitality industry, July is not a great month, right?
Right.
If you're in the retail industry, December is an outstanding month, right? If you're in an industry competing against retail, December's not as great a month.
Yep.
We all have those highs and lows in a business, but you can definitely smooth out a lot more of the highs and lows if you build much more of a machine, right? And I use that word loosely, but a consistent way of acquiring customers at a price that makes sense, and then put them through a known system for monetizing them and making the second and third and fourth sale. You can definitely smooth out a lot of this stuff.
100%. I think why these numbers are the numbers to look at. Everyone we talk to has some version of these numbers, right? Whether, like you said, whether they do customer acquisition cost or CPA or whatever. The whole point is you look at your business on what does it take to acquire a customer and how good are we at monetizing them, right?
Yeah.
CPA, how much does it cost us? LTV, how good are we at monetizing them? And then the third metric is your gas, right? How fast can we go? How much growth can we get out of this? And if we just stayed the same, how much money are we going to make? If you know these three numbers, no matter what level of marketing, business owner, no matter where you act, if you know these three numbers, you will use your business differently. You will absolutely 100% treat your business differently.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're not riding the wave of like, we made a lot of money today. We didn't make a lot of money today, which is how you see a lot of business owners operate, right? Is what the scoreboard is strictly revenue on a daily basis.
Yeah, which is just one number. And the reality is that's one lever, right? I mean, that's literally just like looking at a balance sheet of business and deciding, hey, that's the only thing I ever need to look at. There's a reason why they have three statements, right? There's a reason why these three things go together, because otherwise, hey, I can make a shitload of money and make a business look great this month. You just shut down all your acquisition costs. Yeah. And most businesses will survive for 30 to 90 days. And they'll make a crap load of profit and everything looks great, but the business is completely unhealthy and is about to die. But if you just look at one metric, how much money did we make? You're like, hey, we're fine, right? We're running along down fat, dumb, and happy.
Yep.
And the reality is you're not, right? You're running down the road. Same thing. If you have great front-end acquisition numbers at a great CPA, and ultimately what your 90 and 180 thing is, it doesn't really matter what the revenue shows today, right? You know where it's going to be down the road.
I want to highlight the pitfalls of these numbers. It's easy to look at this and you go, all right, I want my CPA to be the lowest it can be. And that's not true.
No.
Right? You want your CPA to be relative to your LTV. You essentially want it to be the most you can possibly afford to generate the most orders, right? Your CPA isn't, all right, low CPA, high LTV, thumbs up, right? Your CPA is a lever of scale. And your LTV is a lever of scale, right? If you can increase your lifetime value and you can then increase your cost per acquisition, which ultimately the only reason you do that is to generate more orders, right? So that way, instead of, hey, I'm going to make $100 on every order and I made 10 orders, so I'm going to make $1,000. Well, I'll make $50 on every order and I'll generate 500 orders. If you can do math, you know which one makes you more money. And, then it all comes down to your cost per acquisition. How much can you afford to spend to make that money?
You had a great caveat to that, right? Like I've seen a lot of guys, when there's a saying out there running around that he who spends the most money to acquire a customer wins, right?
Right.
And it's not actually true, right? The reality is who can afford to spend the money. Because if you've got a pool of money, you go spend the most money and you're like, hey, I won. But ultimately, if you paid a hell of a lot more than those customers, Silicon Valley does this all day long, you got to pull in money in order to pay for the loss.
Yep.
And you're hoping to make it up in market share over time or, fake numbers or whatever. Ultimately, in a business, the job is to generate revenue. And so it's a balancing act, right? I don't even look at them as levers necessarily anymore. 3 levers. I look at it as much more like a fluid mixture where CPA and LTV, and you're constantly almost like keys on a keyboard, right? You're constantly just kind of moving those in and around. I've seen it over and over again where people go, hey, I'm getting a great customer at 150. I'll pay 200 and I'll get a bunch more customers, and they don't actually get any more customers. They just paid more to acquire the same damn customers they were getting.
Well, we've seen businesses literally blow up because they go, we can generate a lot more orders if we can increase our spend.
Yep.
And like you said, either they don't know or they don't look at their lifetime value, and they go 6 months down the road, and now all of a sudden, like we've seen it where like literally healthy 9-figure businesses will blow up.
Yep.
And they'll almost start over from zero.
And I've had this conversation with a ton of acquisition guys, right? Primarily, they look at 2 things to determine CPA, right? The primary metric that they look at to determine CPA is cart value.
Yep.
That's the number one metric they look at. They don't necessarily look at LTV, right? One of the things that we've always done, and I require it of my guys, is that you only acquire those names that you can monetize.
Yep.
Acquisition and monetization are not 2 different functions. It's the same friggin' team, right? You're acquiring names that you can monetize. And when you build those into 2 separate silos, yeah, sometimes it works and sometimes you get lucky. But sometimes you spend $350 for a name that's only ever going to be worth $350 because the cart's $350, and you're like, hey, look, great. We can acquire 1,000 customers at $350, and then they don't buy anything else from you. You don't know what the 90 or 180 or 360 LTV is. And because they don't buy anything else from you, it didn't make any sense to do it now.
100%. I would close this out. Like if you're listening at home and you're like, how can I apply this? First of all, no matter what part of the business you're in, the business owner or just a junior marketer, learn these numbers. Know what these numbers are. And then before you ever do anything with them, just watch what they do. Look at how they behave. If this is something you haven't tracked before, but make it relative to what you've looked at before. How is this meaningfully different from the numbers I was using before? If I had to put money on the line and I only had 3 numbers to look at to double a business or grow a business or, whatever your performance metric is, these would be it every time.
And I don't care what the role is. In most functions of a company, even if you're a receptionist, there's 3 to 7 key metrics that you should know inside out and backwards. And if you know those 3 to 7 key metrics, it just absolutely changes how you do your job and what you do. And the fact is, the vast majority of people, number 1, don't know what they are, what they should focus on, right? But number 2, don't know how to track them and look at them over time. So they don't, they're all over the place. So like Cody said, I would start with these 3 and figure it out from there, right? Maybe you want to add another thing in. Maybe refund rate is a big deal in your company. You're like, oh, hey, that'll be another metric that I look at, right? Once you get past 7, you're screwed. So don't, I got 30 reports, but there weren't 30 key metrics on every single report, right? There were still 3 key metrics. Each one of those just was a deep dive into, okay, well, what are customers worth 2 years from now? Okay,
or you're looking at a different part of the business or a product or whatever.
Yeah, like refund rates or renewal rates or other things that you impact and do differently. But these for me are the 3 core, and they're where I would start on every business, and I start on every business. And then just adjust from there.
Well, good luck out there. Go make some money. You've been listening to Marketing from the Edge podcast. If you want to hear more of our thoughts every week, visit marketingedgepod.com. We'll share more of our very best lessons, thoughts, strategies for growing a business, as well as some personal stories here from the edge of the world. Invest a couple minutes of your morning and we'll give you the blueprint to growing your business from where it's at today to where you want it to be. That's marketingedgepod.com. If you want to reach out to us directly, feel free to email cody@marketingedgepod.com and you might get a surprise bonus. Next week, John is going to share with you his proven model for developing a team that will do anything for you and follow you anywhere. And I've been assured without being a cult leader. Discover how to grow a team without splurging on massive salaries and trying to headhunt from your competitors. The key to a great team is a great leader. We will give you the framework we use to hire the right people, keep them without bloating salaries, and make them great so your business makes money for you.